Buddy, this is Kurt Pangrass. I'm going to try and do my first little video tip here in finishing resin miniatures. Basically, this is about strengthening certain thin areas on some models. Bear with me, I'm not used to this and I don't have a great setup, but what I have here is an SU39 print that I did. And as you can see, there are a few imperfections. One of them is around the cockpit area, the canopy. You see there are little areas that aren't fully finished, as well as underneath. I don't know if you can see, there's some open areas here which are wheel wells that I couldn't get solidified in the model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an easy way to strengthen areas and fill areas after the print, so you don't waste the whole print and throw them away because there's some imperfections. Basically what you need is a small container with some uncured UV resin, a small paintbrush right here, and a clean area so you can go ahead and do your work. So the principle on this is you're going to be adding one or more layers to already printed areas to build them up and strengthen weak areas and fill in other areas. So it's not too high into concept. So essentially what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start on the bottom and I'm going to fill these two little areas here, or at least strengthen them and fill them with just a little bit of resin. And I'm going to just put a dab on there, and I'm going to look at it from different angles, because sometimes you can put a dab on and it's almost perfect, where you don't have to add another layer or anything. So I'm going to add a little bit there, and I'm going to go ahead and strengthen the side because that wheel well goes in there as well, so we don't want that breaking later on. And we'll do the other side real quick. That is my phone, my app notification. Pretty cool, eh? So once I get that done, and one thing I forgot to mention, you're going to need a UV flashlight, and I'll show it to you here in a minute. As you can see, that didn't fill in right in there, so I'll do another little bit. So UV flashlight, very inexpensive, on Amazon. It takes 3 AA's, I believe, and I'll show you what it looks like. It's just a bunch of little LEDs. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to briefly hold it over the area, very briefly, just a couple seconds, and that actually solidifies this whole area. As you can see, it's still a little tacky, but it is solid. So what that does is it allows you to go ahead and put another layer where you need it to achieve your results. So that looks pretty good. And this is the underside of this mini, and normally this would sit basically like that on a map board or terrain table or something like that. I asked the customer if they wanted it up on stands or anything, and they said no, because with stuff like this, and even metal miniatures, those stands tend to break very easily. So we have that area filled in. While I have this thing upside down, you notice how thin the areas are here on the wing. Well, I'm going to have to sand that later on after full curing so I can get a smooth, straight surface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reinforce this. I'm going to reinforce the entire wing. I'm also going to reinforce the attachment, and I'm going to do the same down here on the rear stabilizers, or I think they're stabilizers, whatever you want to call them. So again, same principle. I'm going to dab a little bit of the resin on here and then spread it out into a thin layer. Now the neat thing about this is it will also help. You can actually get bends out of the print by doing this. Now, one way to do it is if you put it, like if you notice the wing here, the tip bends a little bit up. Well, we kind of want to keep that. So we're not going to need to do anything with that. But if you just put a little bit right in here if this was bent down a little bit and you just put a little bit right in there and you exposed it to the UV light, it would actually bend it the other way. So, and you might even see it here. It might bend it down a little bit when I expose it. So I have the wing, I have a layer on there, and now I'm going to expose it briefly, just to get a quick cure on that layer. And if you notice that you can't really see it, I'm sorry, I'm terrible at this. I'll get better eventually, but it actually straightened the wing out. It took that bend up, or down in this case, and straightened it out. So that's one way to do it. Another way, and I'll do it on this wing, which you can see has a pretty pronounced curve to it. In this case, it is going up. Another way to do this is you go ahead and put on your layer of resin. Let's see, just a nice thin layer. It's slipping out of my hands there. Or you can even go thicker, especially like towards the body where it attaches. And while you're curing, you can actually apply a little bit of pressure while it's curing, and it will actually hold that shape. So this is a way to shape very thin areas, or even things like tubes or pins or other stuff, antennas that are sticking out and are really floppy. You can strengthen them by doing this. So now we have a straight wing. Pretty cool. All right, so while I'm doing this, I'm going to go ahead and get these rear stabilizers, or ailerons, whatever you want to call them. It keeps slipping. So I'm going to go ahead and do these, and essentially I'm going to do the same thing. Put a little bit more towards the root of that piece to help strengthen it. And you notice all these jagged edges. This was printed vertical, so it was standing up. And of course, all the attachments are right along the thinnest part. It's probably not the best way, but it's actually the best print that I was able to get of this model. So I lost a little bit down in here, and I can adjust that by cutting it later on and shaping it with a emery board. So in this case, because it's fairly short, I'm going to go ahead and coat both sides. Now, the concept by coating both sides before curing is that you won't get any bend at all anywhere, because you have an even amount on both sides, so it should not bend at all. So now I'm going to expose it. It helps to turn it on, doesn't it? I'm going to expose it, and they should remain straight with no problems, and they do. And while I'm back here, I'm going to get this vertical stabilizer, because it too is very thin and can move quite a bit even after curing, and it can be very, very brittle. So I'm going to again layer both sides with some resin. Like so. And then I'm going to expose the tail and basically solidify it at that point. Now, another thing this does is it reinforces the areas that you're going to sand or maybe snip pieces off later on. So I don't do my final on this until after it's fully cured out of the curing station. That way I have some heft, some weight to those wings, and I can easily trim them up and clean them up without worrying about or worrying too much about breaking them off. Okay, now finally we have the cockpit. Cockpits are a little different, or large areas or holes that you can fill up. On here, you're going to want to just do a few dabs in the main areas, and it will fill it up pretty well. Again, I'm sorry for the lighting and the camera work, and you can probably hear my 80s music in the background. I hope it's not too annoying. So I'm going to do this, and I don't have to be, because there's really not a lot of detail in this model, at least on the surface. So I'm just going to make sure I have, and I'm actually, I'm doing pretty good on this one because I'm able to get it in one sweep. But if you look at it, it forms a pretty good smooth canopy look. You got to be careful though that you don't build it up in one area more than others, because then it will be very obvious and it doesn't look good. If you want, you can also spread it out, and I do this quite often, and it gives it a pretty sleek look especially after it's all painted. Now you can kind of use this entire process if you wanted to go over your entire model and add a smoothing layer. Now you're still going to have some, you're still going to be able to see some of these layers, but it's not going to be nearly as noticeable. But excuse me, sorry. But the neat thing is you can actually alter the finished product pretty well just by doing this. So it's a pretty simple concept. It's fairly easy to do, and believe me, after doing probably well over 2,000 miniatures like this over the last 6 to 7 months or so, I've gotten pretty good at this, and you will too. But it will save you printing time in the long run, and it can really save you on prints and resin in the long run. I hope you enjoyed this. As I come up with other ideas and I have other tips, I will definitely make more videos. Thanks for watching, and take care.